All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Ransom Reviews. Welcome to my new bookshelf where I got these cool lights that I really thought was going to make the production value better and has actually just made it worse. So awesome. Today, we're going to be looking at the top 5 nonfiction books that I read in 2020. Only 5 because I didn't read that many nonfiction books. It's not my favorite genre, although I definitely do dabble. So let's get started. At number 5 is The Great Siege, Malta, 1565 by, oh my God, I can't say his name, Ernla Bradford. Let's just call him E. Bradford. Mr. Bradford has written a book here that is history. It's not historical fiction, it's just history, which usually scares me away because I find straight history books a lot of times to be quite dry. But this book is riveting. Voltaire said that there's hardly anything that's better known than the Great Siege of Malta. And yet I kind of didn't know anything about it before reading this book or listening to it on audiobook. And I found it completely fascinating from the jump. It is history, but it is a fascinating period of history, and it is populated with really interesting historical figures like Suleiman the Magnificent and some of the soldiers from that he had out working for him in the Ottoman Empire. And that's really what this is. It's a clash of the Ottoman Empire, the Muslims, versus the Christian knights, sort of like the Knights Templar on this island fortress. And apparently it was one of the bloodiest battles in history. I think like 30,000 people died or something crazy like that. And it's just really, really fun. Bradford tells it in like an action-packed, easy to read, straightforward way. The only real complaint that I had while reading this was that it's very clear that Bradford was like, here are the Christian knights, they are the good guys, here are the awful, evil Muslim Ottoman people. And that's not great. I would have enjoyed it more, I think, if it was just delivered historically. These are the two sides. This is what was at stake. This is what they're fighting for, without sort of the Christian morality that was sort of attached to it. But other than that, if you can get over that, this is a really good read, really fun, interesting, and informative, and I highly recommend it. It scored an 8 overall for me. Should probably mention that. Okay, moving on to number 4. It is also a book that I listened to on audiobook, and that is Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. This book scored an 8.2. I'm surprised that I liked this book as much as I did because it's kind of almost become a meme about people who are trying to inspire themselves, or you almost feel like those crappy plaques that you see in people's bathrooms, Live, Laugh, Love by Marcus Aurelius. Now, I don't think he made that quote, but that's basically what this book is. It's just filled with these sort of inspiring quotes about how to live your life, how to wake up in the morning, how to regulate your thoughts, what you should believe in, how you should compose yourself. They're all tied to the Stoic philosophy. And I don't know, man. I just found it really, like, most of the advice is pretty useful. Just about like setting your mind towards positive thoughts, not being concerned with the thoughts of others, working hard, not pretending to be a good man, but actually being a good man. I found it all relatively relatable, which is pretty crazy given that it was written, a few thousand years ago. And it's also just interesting him as a character, that he is this Greek general, emperor, marching on campaign, murdering people. And then like after he cleans the blood off of his hands, he sits down at his table and writes in his journal thoughts about being a good man and how to compose yourself and think positive thoughts. I find the dichotomy really, really interesting. He seems like a really, really interesting dude. And even if you're not interested in Roman history or Marcus Aurelius himself, I think you'd still find a lot of really good advice in this book that you could apply to your own life. Okay. First hard copy, number 3, Chicken Hawk by Robert Mason. This is oftentimes regarded as the best book on the Vietnam War. I haven't, strangely enough, I read a lot of books on war, but this might be my first or second on the Vietnam War. For some reason, I don't read a lot of books on the Vietnam War, and it's too bad because it is such a big part of American history and world history. And I wish I had read more about it. But this is basically the memoir, the story of this guy, Robert Mason, Bob Mason, who was a helicopter pilot, a Huey pilot during the Vietnam War. And it is, it's pretty heavy duty, man. Like, it is just, it's the opposite of what a Hollywood movie would be. You know, it's the opposite of what you're used to with war movies, where they're sort of emotionally pulling your strings and you feel almost like you're being manipulated to feel sorrow and remorse for these horrible events. Whereas this book is just told, it's just very straightforward. In fact, the first 100 or maybe even 200 pages are just like about the inside of a helicopter and like what stick you're supposed to pull to get it to lift off the ground. A lot is about the nuts and bolts of being a helicopter pilot and his training. And that's, I didn't love that, but I also respected it because he's writing about what he knows. That's his experience. He was trained as a helicopter pilot and that he's delivering that message. Once you get towards like the second third of the book is when it really starts to get quite grisly. I mean, bodies are just dropping left and right. People are dying. And what's so striking about it is that he's not writing it in that sort of emotional way. Like, this was my buddy and now he's gone. What am I going to do? It's just matter of fact. 1 minute, here's Tim, my best friend. Next minute, Tim's dead. And then just moving on. And like, it starts to really get under your skin after a while, as, you know, I'm sure any human would attest to when you read about just the wanton violence. It's striking. And then towards the end of the book, you witness as his life sort of unravels. He's basically suffering from PTSD, although he doesn't know it at the time. I don't even think there was a name for that at the time, or it was just coming out. And so you're seeing all these telltale signs of what we now know to be PTSD, but he just doesn't, he's like from that generation where he's just like, I'm going to be all right. I don't know what's wrong. We'll be fine. And doesn't realize that he's actually suffering from basically what is a disease, a sickness. And man, it is tragic and haunting. And I'll tell you, like, after I put the book down, it stuck with me, man. It stuck with me. It's pretty powerful stuff, you know, without attempting to be. It's just telling you what happened, and it really is striking. So if you're interested in the Vietnam War, definitely check out Chicken Hawk by Robert Mason. No, oh yeah, 8.5 for Chicken Hawk by Robert Mason. Number 2 on my list is Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. There's Matthew. Say hello to the camera, Matthew. Hello, everyone. Don't forget to sleep tonight. This book is your worst nightmare, pun intended. There is basically, Matthew Walker is a neuroscientist. He's been studying sleep for 20 years, doing research, accumulating research, and he's now sort of distilled it into this 350-page book that is sort of written in layman's terms, dumbed down a little bit for the public to read it, which I very much appreciated. But it's just chock full of research and experiments and history and information on sleep and how it basically connects to every aspect of our lives, our health, our skin, our weight, our memory, our performance at work, at school, our mood, mental illnesses, sicknesses. It's shocking how he's been able to connect strings from sleep to literally everything that you could possibly conceive. And that's why it's a nightmare, because there's so many just shocking truths in here about how most of us are not getting enough sleep, and how if you're not getting enough sleep, a million bad things are happening to you. So I can't recommend this book enough. I think it's almost required reading. It is just so illuminating, and I've actually made my students read it. This year, I'm teaching it for a research unit because I think it is basically a perfect, borderline perfect example of what kind of writing can come from properly done research. And so far, none of my students have sent me any death threats, so I imagine it must be pretty good. This book scored an 8.5 for me as well. And that brings us to number one. Number one on the list is The Breaks of the Game by David Halberstam. And this book just hits so many things that I love. If you have spent any time on my channel, you'll know that I'm not only obsessed with books, I'm also obsessed with basketball. And you might not know that I actually went to school for broadcast journalism. I was a journalist for a little while, a very poor one with almost no experience. But that being said, Halberstam is an epic journalist who has written on global conflicts, financial conflicts, wars, history, and he also wrote this book on basketball, where he basically follows the 1979-1980 Portland Trail Blazers around for an entire NBA season and just documents it, and then ends up writing a book about their season. But that's so much more limited than what this book actually is. This book it talks about not just basketball, but the financial aspects of basketball, of being an owner, of being a GM, of being a player, the contracts. It talks about race, what it was like to be a Black player at this time, what they were going through, what they were dealing with, race in America. It talks about everything: economics, politics, sociology, sports. It talks about injuries and how you recover from them and the mental toll it takes on players. And it's a deep dive on several different players' lives, their backgrounds, how they grew up and where they ended up. And so it goes beyond just the Portland Trail Blazers. It really is almost an all-encompassing book about what it means to be a good journalist, which I don't know if that exists anymore, what it means to write a riveting story based on really good reporting, what it means to understand the games of basketball, that it's not just a sport, that there are lives here at stake. And I absolutely loved it. It got a 9.0 overall for me. It was borderline perfect. It's often considered to be the best book about basketball. And I was so lucky that I was able to track it down because it is not easy to find. And I was lucky to find it at my local used bookstore. And I was thrilled to find it. And it did not disappoint me at all. The writing is absolutely superb. And the storytelling is excellent. This is the kind of book where you go off on tangents. He mentions a guy in the book, and you end up looking up clips of him on YouTube and researching his history, and it makes you want to learn more. And that is the best kind of book, in my opinion, is the one that stimulates your brain and makes you want to learn even more than what was already in the book. So definitely a must read. Even if you're not into basketball, I think you would really like this book. So that is my top five. I do have a couple of honorable mentions real quick. I didn't quite make the top five, and I didn't want to put them in because there's not enough to make 10. So The Sun Does Shine by Anthony Ray Hinton is the true story of a Black dude who got put on death row for like 30 years for a crime he didn't commit. It's pretty shocking. I think the story is amazing. I'm not sure that the book is amazing, but it is an incredibly shocking story. This one got a 7.3 overall for me. And next is Strunk and White's The Elements of Style. A few years ago, when I was pretending like I was going to be a writer instead of starting a crappy podcast that nobody listens to, I was told repeatedly that this is the book that everybody must read before they want to become a writer. It's like the writer's Bible. And look at that. What a great Bible. It's like 100 pages. Great. Take notes, Bible. It is. Would you believe me if I told you that it's about grammar and it's fun? Is that possible? Because I laughed out loud multiple times in this book while reading sections about grammar, what words to use, what words not to use, what words are weak and just make you a useless person if you use them. I just found it so fun, and I really, really loved it. And I would recommend it to anybody that has even a passing interest in writing, reading, language, whatever. And the last one is War by Sebastian Junger. Oh God. And this one is quite similar to Chicken Hawk, except instead of the Vietnam War, it is Afghanistan War. The war in Afghanistan. Yeah. And instead of being told by a soldier, it's being told by a reporter who basically attaches himself to this unit and follows them around and then reports on it. And it's pretty depressing, but very real and a very good look at what modern warfare is like. I think they actually made this into, they made it into a movie as well, a documentary called Restrepo that I think won some awards years ago, but definitely a cool book worth checking out. Okay, that's it for today. This video, 5 nonfiction books, top 5 of 2020. I have only one list left. Next week is the top 10 worst books of 2020. So that should be interesting. So far, all these lists have been very positive. I've been giving book recommendations. Next week is more of me going on rants about why I really did not like these 10 particular books. So come back for that next week if you're interested. If not, I will see you next time on Rants and Reviews.